Alright, in this lesson we're going to look at multiplication by factoring. And the question is really, do our students really understand what factors are? Of course, factors are the numbers that are multiplied together to give us a certain product. And before we begin though, I do want to discuss two things. The first of which is that students really must develop fluency adding and subtracting two-digit integers. Obviously this is a skill that they've been working on for even our third graders have been working on for a couple years. But as students get older, they should be very fluent in adding and subtracting two-digit integers. And this may sound like a simplistic idea, but it really is something that's essential to being able to multiply and do other things in our heads. So that's the first thing. Our second is that students must develop fluency multiplying integers from 0 to 12. Our times tables, often learned in third grade, and really should be mastered by the time students are done in third grade. In my classes, even 7th all the way through 10th grade, every year in the first quarter, the students have a test on their multiplication tables, and I do 2 to 12 for that age group. But really, that I just try to stress to them the importance of understanding and really knowing those multiplication tables from 0 to 12. And the question is, how well do our students need to know their multiplication tables? I believe the key is that students should be fluent enough not only to know the answers to a problem, but when they see an answer, they recognize its factors. This is essential for both fluency in division and in multiplication of numbers over 12. For example, when students see the number 48, they should automatically think of 6 times 8 and 4 times 12. This, along with the principles we'll consider for multiplication, can also help them find the other pairs of factors, like 1 times 48, 2 times 24, and 3 times 16. So these are essentials, and having a firm grasp on those multiplication tables especially is really critical in moving forward here. So let's look at a couple problems. I want to just work through a few, and obviously you can apply these to many different situations. But here's 4 problems, and can your students multiply these? 4 times 36, 6 times 22, 3 times 24, 4 times 32. And the reality of the fact is, at least the first 3, they can if they just understand their multiplication tables and understand the concept of a factor. We're going to expand this idea for our 4th example and look at how simple doubling can be. But let's go ahead and dive into our first example. The answer to this question, of course, is with factors they can. And the way that we can do this is by what I had mentioned before about recognizing a solution as the product of two factors. For instance, when we see 36, we ought to see that as 3 times 12, 4 times 9, 6 times 6. Okay, in this example, I'm going to use 3 times 12, and you'll notice I actually regrouped. And the reason for this is the associative property. Now, students, especially third graders, don't need to know that term, but this is a concept that they should understand, that when you have 3 things multiplied together, you can regroup them. And since 36 is 3 times 12, what I'm going to do is multiply the 4 times 3 first, and notice what I end up with. I end up with one of my multiplication tables. 12 times 12 is 144. So you see here how we broke down a number, rearranged the factors a little bit, regrouped them really, and we ended up with something that was back in our multiplication tables that we've memorized. Our second example, 6 times 22. Of course, we see 22, those repeating digits. We think of a factor of 11, and this is 2 times 11. but now I'm going to group the 2 with the 6 instead. 6 times 2, of course, is 12. 12 times 11 is in our multiplication tables, 132. Our third straightforward example is 3 times 24. 24 can be factored a number of different ways: 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. In this case, I'm going to use 4 times 6, and then I'm going to regroup. I'm going to group the 3 with the 4. 3 times 4 is 12, and then 12 times 6, hey, that's in our multiplication tables, that's 72. Alright, so those are our first 3 pretty straightforward examples. Our next example, I'm actually going to expand this idea along with the idea of doubling. Okay, doubling is relatively simple in the sense that, especially if you have a number like 32, when you see digits like this, to double a number is simply doubling the tens digit and doubling the ones digit. And if this happens to go over 10, you'll have to carry a 1. Okay, so using that principle, I'm actually going to recognize 4 as the product of 2 times 2. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to regroup the second 2 with the 32. In this case, I'm doubling 32. 32 doubled, 3 doubled is 6, 2 doubled is 4, so that's 64. Now I'm doubling 64. 6 doubled is 12, 4 doubled is 8, so that's a 128. So you see here, if we can get our students to really grasp the concept of factoring and learn a couple of other basic skills like doubling in our heads, we can greatly expand the amount of arithmetic that they're able to do in their heads, simply as a result of memorizing their multiplication tables. And that is a really incredible ability, and really gives them a lot of flexibility and a lot of freedom from the calculator as they move forward.